I was standing there, heart racing, as his mother looked me up and down like I wasn't even worth her time. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice sharp and dismissive, like I was an error in an otherwise perfect picture. "You're not what we want for him." That phrase kept echoing in my head, like a sound that would never fade away. I wasn't good enough, not because of who I was, my intelligence, my kindness, my love, but because my skin was dark. Kara had never felt so small. She stood frozen in the grand entryway of the lavish home, her heart sinking as Elizabeth's words cut through her like shards of glass. Ryan's mother didn't need to say much. Her disdain was written all over her face, in the way her lips curled into a tight, disapproving smile, the way her eyes scanned Kara like a schoolteacher marking a failed assignment. Kara wanted to scream, to demand why her love for Ryan wasn't enough, but she knew the answer. It wasn't about love. It was about her skin, her heritage, her very existence. What would you do if you were rejected for simply being who you are? Kara asked herself that question as she walked away from that house, tears burning in her eyes. It was a question she would wrestle with for weeks, months, as she tried to make sense of the pain, the betrayal, and the devastating realization that love wasn't always enough. Kara had always believed in love. Growing up in a small but vibrant community in the heart of the city, she'd witnessed love in its many forms. Her parents' quiet, steady partnership, her grandmother's fierce devotion to her family, even the fleeting romances of her friends. Love, she thought, was the one thing that could transcend everything: race, class, and all the barriers society tried to build. At 25, Kara was an independent woman with dreams of her own. She had just launched her own small business, a boutique marketing firm, after working tirelessly to save up for years. Her confidence and determination were traits she carried like armor, but even the strongest armor couldn't protect a heart that longed for connection. Kara met Ryan at a charity gala she'd attended to network for her business. He was everything she didn't expect: charming, attentive, and utterly captivated by her. While others at the event seemed preoccupied with status and appearances, Ryan was different. He had approached her with a warm smile and a genuine interest in her work. "What you're doing is incredible," he had said, his blue eyes sparkling with admiration. "I'd love to hear more about it." From that moment, a connection began to form. Over the next few weeks, they spent hours talking about their dreams, their fears, and the futures they envisioned. Ryan told her he didn't care about their differences. He loved her for her intelligence, her passion, and the way she made him feel alive. "I don't care where we come from," he had said one night as they lay under the stars in the park. "What matters is where we're going, and I want us to go there together." Kara had believed him. She had let herself dream of a future where their love could overcome anything. She had trusted him with her heart, not knowing how fragile it would soon become. Kara had spent the morning preparing for the lunch. She stood in front of her mirror, smoothing down the soft lavender dress she had chosen carefully. It wasn't too loud, but it wasn't plain either. It was perfect, or at least she hoped it was. She wanted to make a good impression on Ryan's family. As Ryan drove her to his parents' estate on the outskirts of town, Kara felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. Meeting the family was a big step, one that Ryan had assured her was long overdue. "They'll love you," he said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "How could they not? You're amazing." Kara smiled at him, trying to let his confidence soothe her unease. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that love could dissolve the invisible walls that sometimes seemed to separate her from the world Ryan inhabited, a world of wealth, privilege, and unspoken expectations. But the moment they arrived, Kara felt the first crack in her confidence. The estate was grand, almost intimidating, with sprawling gardens and a driveway long enough to stretch into the horizon. As they walked up the marble steps to the front door, Kara noticed the subtle shift in Ryan's demeanor. His usual carefree smile was replaced with a nervous energy, and his grip on her hand tightened. The door opened, and there stood Elizabeth, Ryan's mother, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Kara," she said, her voice dripping with politeness that felt more like a thinly veiled test. "It's so nice to meet you." Elizabeth's eyes flickered over Kara, taking in her appearance in a way that made her feel like she was being silently judged. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. White," Kara said, her voice steady despite the lump forming in her throat. Elizabeth didn't respond right away. Instead, she stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. Kara felt the weight of the woman's gaze on her back as she walked into the house. The interior was as grand as the exterior. Elegant furniture, crystal chandeliers, and walls adorned with family portraits. Kara couldn't help but notice that every face in those portraits was pale, European, and impossibly perfect. David, Ryan's father, greeted her with a nod and a firm handshake. He didn't say much, but his silence spoke volumes. Kara could feel his disapproval in the way he avoided meeting her eyes, as if acknowledging her presence was an effort. The dining room was no more welcoming. The table was set with fine china and silverware that looked like it had never been touched. Kara sat beside Ryan, trying to ignore the tension that seemed to hum in the air. "So, Kara," Elizabeth began, her tone overly casual. "Where are you from?" The question was innocent enough on the surface, but Kara recognized the undertone. It wasn't curiosity, it was something else. "I grew up here in the city," Kara replied, keeping her voice polite. "And your family?" Elizabeth pressed, her smile sharp. "They're originally from the South," Kara said, her tone even but her patience thinning. She could feel Ryan stiffen beside her. Elizabeth nodded as if filing the information away. Different cultures bring so much variety to the table, don't they? Kara didn't miss the way Elizabeth's gaze flickered toward her as she said the word, different. Ryan tried to steer the conversation to safer ground, but Elizabeth wasn't done. "Ryan," she said, turning to her son with a smile that was anything but warm, "you've always had a knack for choosing unconventional paths." Kara felt the sting of the comment, though it wasn't directed at her directly. She glanced at Ryan, hoping he would defend her, but he only gave his mother a tight smile. The meal dragged on, each bite of food tasting like ash in Kara's mouth. Elizabeth continued to make thinly veiled comments about shared values and family traditions, while David remained silent, his disapproval radiating like a cold wind. It wasn't until dessert that Elizabeth delivered the final blow. "Ryan," she said, setting down her fork with deliberate precision, "you deserve someone who fits into our family, someone with the same roots. It's important to preserve what we've built." Kara froze, the word slicing through her like a blade. She looked at Ryan, hoping, praying that he would say something, anything to defend her. But Ryan just sat there, his face pale, his eyes fixed on his plate. The silence that followed was deafening. Kara felt the weight of Elizabeth's words settle over her like a suffocating blanket. She wanted to scream, to demand why she wasn't good enough, but the words wouldn't come. When the meal finally ended, Kara excused herself to the restroom. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her chest tightening as tears threatened to spill over. She had never felt so out of place, so unwelcome. By the time she and Ryan left, Kara's heart felt heavier than it ever had. The ride home was excruciatingly silent. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, his jaw tight, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Kara sat beside him, staring out of the window, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. She could still hear Elizabeth's words ringing in her ears. "You deserve someone who fits into our family." It wasn't the first time Kara had faced prejudice, but this was different. This wasn't from a stranger on the street or a co-worker at her office. This was from the mother of the man she loved, the man who had promised her that their love could overcome anything. And yet, he had said nothing. He had let her sit there, humiliated and dismissed, without so much as a word of defense. When they reached Kara's apartment, Ryan finally broke the silence. "Kara," he began, his voice hesitant. I'm sorry about tonight." She turned to him, her eyes hard. "Sorry? That's all you have to say?" Her voice cracked, betraying the pain she was trying so hard to keep contained. "You didn't say a single word, Ryan. You just sat there and let them treat me like I didn't belong." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to make things worse." "Make things worse?" Kara repeated, her voice rising. "How could it possibly get worse than your mother telling you that I'm not good enough for you? That I'll never fit into your family? Kara, you don't understand. My parents, they're set in their ways. They've always had these expectations for me, for who I'm supposed to be with. It's not about you, it's exactly about me." Kara cut him off, her voice trembling. "It's about the color of my skin, Ryan. Don't you dare try to sugarcoat it." Ryan looked away, guilt and frustration etched across his face. "I love you, Kara. You know that. But I don't know how to fix this. My parents, Your parents, Kara interrupted, shaking her head. You're hiding behind them. Don't you see that? You promised me that we could face anything together. But the moment things got hard, you chose silence. You chose them. Kara, it's not that simple, Ryan said, his voice rising. You don't know what it's like to be stuck between the person you love and the family that raised you. And you don't know what it's like to be judged for something you can't change, she shot back. You don't know what it's like to walk into a room and feel like you have to prove your worth over and over again, just because of the way you look. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with something that might have been regret, and Kara felt her heart break all over again. She had loved him, truly, deeply, but in that moment she realized that love wasn't enough, not when it came with conditions, not when it required her to fight a battle she couldn't possibly win on her own. Ryan, she said softly, her voice heavy with sorrow, I can't do this. I can't be with someone who doesn't have the courage to stand by me. I deserve better than this. Kara, please. Ryan started, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. No, Ryan, she said, tears streaming down her face. I love you, but I love myself too, and I won't let anyone, make me feel like I'm not enough. With that, she got out of the car, leaving Ryan sitting in stunned silence. She didn't look back as she walked up to her apartment, but the moment the door closed behind her, she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Kara's life. She felt like she was drowning in a sea of emotions, heartbreak, anger, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of inadequacy. She replayed the events of that night over and over in her mind, questioning everything. Had she done something wrong? Was there something she could have said or done to make them accept her? But deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't about her. It was about their prejudice, their inability to see beyond the color of her skin. And as much as it hurt, Kara began to realize that their rejection didn't define her worth. She threw herself into her work, pouring her pain into something productive. She spent countless nights journaling, reflecting on her identity and her dreams. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild herself, piece by piece. Kara started spending more time with her friends, who reminded her of her strength and resilience. She leaned on her family, who reminded her of where she came from and the pride she should carry in her heritage. And little by little, the weight on her chest began to lift. It wasn't easy, and the scars of that rejection didn't fade overnight. But Kara was determined to find herself again, to find the woman who had walked into that relationship with so much hope and confidence, and to make her even stronger. Months passed, but the memory of that painful evening at Ryan's family home still lingered in Kara's mind. It wasn't just the rejection that hurt. It was the way Ryan had failed to fight for her, the way he had let her go so easily. But as time went on, Kara began to realize that his inability to stand up for their love wasn't a reflection of her worth. It was a reflection of his weakness. She had thrown herself into her work and reconnected with old friends, surrounding herself with people who uplifted and valued her. Slowly, she began to feel the weight of the past lifting. She still believed in love, deep, unconditional love, but now, she knew it had to be rooted in respect and acceptance. It was on one of those seemingly ordinary days that Kara met Eli. She was attending a networking event for young professionals, her first in months since the breakup. Kara had almost skipped it, but her best friend, Maya, had insisted. You need to get out there, girl, Maya had said. You've been hiding away for too long. Besides, you never know who you'll meet. Kara had rolled her eyes at the suggestion, but now, standing in the crowded room with a glass of wine in hand, she was glad she had come. Eli caught her attention almost immediately. He was tall and striking, with deep brown eyes that seemed to hold a world of stories. He was dressed sharply but not ostentatiously, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that intrigued her. It was Kara who accidentally bumped into him as they both reached for the same appetizer at the buffet table. Sorry about that, she said, smiling apologetically. No need to apologize, Eli replied, returning her smile. It's not every day I get to meet someone who appreciates mini quiches as much as I do. Kara laughed, and just like that, a conversation began. Eli was a lawyer, passionate about social justice and community development. As they talked, Kara found herself drawn to his warmth and sincerity. It wasn't just his words. It was the way he listened, the way he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and experiences. By the end of the night, they had exchanged numbers, and Kara felt a spark she hadn't felt in a long time. Their first date was simple: a walk in the park followed by coffee at a cozy little cafe. There were no grand gestures, no empty promises, just two people getting to know each other, sharing stories, and finding comfort in each other's company. Eli was different. He didn't shy away from difficult conversations. He shared his own experiences with Prejudice, the challenges he had faced as a black man navigating a world that often judged him unfairly. He understood Kara in a way that Ryan never could, and he never made her feel like she had to explain herself or prove her worth. "I see you, Kara," he said one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the city skyline. "Not just the surface, but everything that makes you who you are. And I think you're incredible." Kara felt her heart swell at his words. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, truly seen and loved for who she was. With Eli, there were no walls, no barriers. She could be herself, unapologetically, and in his presence, she began to heal in ways she hadn't thought possible. Eli encouraged her to embrace her identity and to take pride in her journey. He reminded her that her worth wasn't measured by anyone else's approval, and that love, real love, was about lifting each other up, not tearing each other down. As their relationship blossomed, Kara began to see herself in a new light. She was no longer the woman who had been crushed by rejection. She was stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. She started volunteering at local organizations that supported young women of color, sharing her story and helping others find their voices. Kara wanted to be a source of inspiration, a reminder that no matter how society tried to diminish them, they were worthy of love and respect. One evening, as she and Eli sat on the couch in her apartment, he turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about that organization you've been working with. Have you ever thought about starting something of your own?" Kara tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Well," Eli said, "you have such a powerful story, and you're already making a difference. What if you created a platform, a space where women could share their experiences, support each other, and grow together?" Kara's eyes lit up at the idea. She had always wanted to do something meaningful, something that could create lasting change. And now, with Eli by her side, she felt like anything was possible. Kara's journey came full circle as she launched her organization, Empower Her, a platform dedicated to helping women of color overcome adversity and embrace their worth. Through workshops, mentorship programs, and public speaking events, Kara shared her story and encouraged others to break free from toxic relationships and societal expectations. Eli stood by her every step of the way, cheering her on and reminding her of her strength. Their love was a partnership, built on mutual respect and a shared vision for the future. As Kara looked back on everything she had been through, she realized that the pain she had endured had shaped her into the woman she was today. She no longer carried the weight of rejection because she had found something far greater: self-love, purpose, and a love that celebrated her for exactly who she was. In the end, Kara knew that she was more than good enough. She was extraordinary, and she would never again let anyone make her feel otherwise.